Next one is called the ujub. Now, al-ujbu, Imam al-Ghazali says that ujub, the difference between ujub and kibar is that kibar needs two people. Kibar is arrogance, right? And it needs two people. You need the mutakabbir, the arrogant one, wal mutakabbir alayh, and the one who is having arrogance shown to him. So with kibr, if Zayd comes and tells Amr, you little insignificant fool, why didn't you do what I told you? He's mutakabbir and Amr is mutakabbir alayh. He's being shown arrogance. Whereas the mu'jab is similar to kibr, only he doesn't need a second person. Right? He's just impressed with himself. He thinks that he's better than other people. If he has a mirror, then he's happy. Because he's just looking and he's really impressed at how wonderful he is, how magnificent he is. Now, or she. وَالْعُجْبُ الْإِسْتِعْظَامُ لِلنَّعِيمِ مَعْ نِسْيَانِ كَوْنِهِ مِنَ اللَّهِ وَقَعٍ. He says the definition of ujub is isti'azam al-na'im, that you exalt or magnify the ni'mah, the blessing, مَعْ نِسْيَانَ الْمُنْعِمِ, but you forget who gave you the blessing. So, and this is the thing where people, in this culture, if somebody says, oh, you're so beautiful, and they say thank you, like as if, they did something about it, right? And it's a very odd thing, if you think about that. It's a very odd thing. Now they might have paid a lot of money or something for reconstructive facial surgery, but they should still thank the plastic surgeon, not the person himself. So the point is that if Allah made somebody beautiful, then they should be grateful to Allah. They should see the mun'im is Allah. It's not themselves. They didn't do anything. And even if they have talents, those talents, even raw God-given talents, still need to be developed, right? So, nobody is born with a talent to do anything right. No, they have to work at it. A person who has beautiful calligraphy, it looks easy to you. It's like I took a lesson with Sidi Muhammad Zakaria, who's a famous calligrapher, American calligrapher. And when I watched him doing the calligraphy, he made it look so easy, I thought, I can do that. And they say the sign of a master is he does it so easy that you think you can do it yourself. Imam al-Jurjani, he said that the master of rhetoric, is the one who, when he speaks so with such facility that the people listening think, I could do that, but they couldn't. And so the same is true with all these things. But when you see Muhammad Zakaria, Sidi Muhammad, doing his calligraphy, what you have to realize is there were years of patient perseverance, of doing over and over again wows and yas and bas, and then writing out things. And so he did that. And then you see the finished product, you say, Subhanallah. And that is a gift from Allah. If he starts thinking, look at all my accomplishments, which he wouldn't, he's a very humble man. But if somebody who was given a gift like that, he says, oh, I worked so hard and I've done this all by myself. And there's many people all over the world that do this, right? That think that it's their accomplishment. I got myself by pulling myself up by the bootstraps. I'm the one that did all this. And that's mu'jab bi nafsihi. Because the mu'min sees, if Allah gave you tawfiq to be disciplined, that was from Allah. And you can see it within a family. One person has discipline and another person doesn't. Grew up in the same family, same environmental factors, right? One person has the ability to be disciplined. They go on and they master in their studies and they graduate with the honors and anything that happens, it's Allah who did it. In Imam al-Bayhaqi says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ صَانِعُ كُلِّ صَنَعٍ وَصَنْعَتِهِ Allahu khaliqu kulli sani'in wa san'ati. Allah makes every creator and His creation. So Allah is the maker of the airplane. Allah is the maker of the automobile. Allah is the maker of the computer. All these things. Allah created the one who produced it and what He produced. Allah. And once you realize that, then you lose your ujab. You can't be impressed with yourself. And then the other thing to remember is فَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ. Over everyone who knows something, there's somebody that knows more. And this is what Musa a.s. was asked, is there anybody more knowledgeable than you? And he said, I don't think so. And Allah sent him Al-Khadr, who wasn't a prophet. And He made him a student. And he even ended up not being the student that he should have been, right? And this was before his nubuwwah, but when he was with Al-Khadr, he kept asking questions. And the Prophet ﷺ said, had he not asked those questions, he would have learned so much more from Al-Khadr. So he didn't learn everything he could have learned. But he learned, he was taught. And the biggest lesson that he learned was to recognize there's always somebody that knows more than you. And never to do that. So it's very, very, alayhi salam. You have to be careful when you talk about prophets, and you have to be really careful with the words you choose and things. I don't want to say he wasn't a good student or anything like that. You just have to really be careful about those things. So I'm sure he was a brilliant student, but he had a lesson to learn, and Allah taught him that lesson through Al-Khadr, alayhi salam. Now, vanity, the reason I translated that vanity, ujub, if you look at the word vanity in the dictionary, it's called excessive pride in one's appearance or accomplishment. It's very close to ujub in Arabic. Ajiba means to wonder or marvel at. Ujub is to marvel at one's own self or one's accomplishment. And then vanity comes from a Latin word vanus, which means empty, right? And so it's the idea that the source of our vanity is empty and will vanish. Now, one of the things that the Roman used to do, they had these victory parades, like when Caesar would have victory. Then they'd have this huge victory parade in Rome, and they'd hold a laurel leaf over the victor. A slave he'd ride through the city on a chariot, and everybody would be cheering him. And he would hold this laurel leaf, and then the slave would say to him, all is vanity. He'd remind this general, it's all vanity. And it's an ancient wisdom, it's a hikmah, to remind people that all these accomplishments, one day, who's ever going to remember it? It's like, Charles Lindbergh, when he flew over, they had a huge parade for him in New York City. Within 10 years, he was a criminal by the American government because he's a Nazi sympathizer, right? So the hero, there's a great story of, I can't remember his name. He wrote Secret Life of Walter Mitty, James Thurber. It's called The Hero That Shouldn't Have Been, or something like that. And it's about this guy who who saves this child, and all the newspaper reporters come and they want to make him a hero, and it turns out he's this really bad guy, and he just wants to make money out of the thing. He did a good thing, so he realized he's not a good hero for the people. So as he's looking out the window, seeing all the crowds applauding and things, one of the reporters pushes him out the window. So the point is, right, is that there's always going to be this other side to things. No matter how much good a person does, there's always going to be people that are detractors, or it's just a vain thing. Like now the Yankees went through New York, and they had these huge ticker tape parades and celebrating the greatest team that ever lived as the Titanic's going down, right? New York City's just complete disaster, morally, socially, ethically, everything. But we've got the best baseball team in the world. That's ujub, right? That is complete mu'jab. New York is mu'jaba bi nafsiha, right? And it's really a bad situation when people get into that state. So he says, وَالْعَجْزِ أَن تَخْلُقَ نَفْعًا أَوْ ضَرَرًا فَهُوَ مِنَ الْجَهْلِ بِالْأَمْرَيْنِ صَدَرًا. And then he says, also knowing that as a result of your impotence, you can neither create any benefit nor produce any harm. Your ajiz. Indeed, vanity originates from nothing other than one's ignorance of these two matters, that He, Allah, is the fashioner and giver of blessings alone, and you're incapable of doing anything. That, in not knowing that, that's how you get to ujub. So it's a disease that you have to be on guard of if you do anything well, or even if you don't do anything well. Right? You have to be on guard of being mu'jab. Or, more so for women than men, but people that Allah has given outward beauty, physical beauty, getting vain about that, having vanity about how one looks. Men are susceptible to that as well, right? Certainly. But for women, it's also a very dangerous thing to fall into. And then the next one is al-ghish, which is fraud. إخفاء ضرر ديني أو دنيوي ولو عن الذمي أو المعاهد وبعض شرح بأنه تزيين غير المصلحة. So he says fraud is to conceal some fault or harm, either religious or worldly, even from a protected minority or someone who has a treaty with the Muslims. Others have interpreted it to be the adornment of something that lacks benefit or making an evil appear to be good. So, ghish, there's a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ghashana falaysa minna." Whoever tricks us is not from us. So, ghish, a Muslim is not somebody who has this fraud. And it's a very common thing. And what he's saying is you can be fraudulent in a worldly or an otherworldly matter. So in the Sharia, it is haram to sell something without pointing out the ayub. If there's something wrong with the thing you're selling, you can't hide that. If you don't know it, you really don't, like you sell a car and you don't know that the engine is actually in really bad shape. You don't know. But if you know it, you have to tell them. Right? And that is ghish if you don't. And it's a disease in the heart that enables you to do that. That's a disease in the heart. That's where it emanates from. And also, I put in there just in the note that this is certainly prominent in modern advertising, which to me is indicative of the fact that only a diseased heart could do that type of work. And it's also something that the sophists in Greece, safsata, was something, what the sophists did, they worshipped rhetoric. And they didn't believe, they were really the first historical relativists, right? Relativism is that you don't believe in right and wrong. You believe might makes right, whoever has the most persuasive argument. There's no truth. And this is a modern disease as well. But the sophists were people who mastered rhetoric. And they believed actually the most important thing was to be convincing. And it didn't matter if you were telling the truth or lying. The important thing is you got what you wanted. And the way to get that was through rhetoric, to master the arts of rhetoric, which they called the art of persuasion, right? The art of persuasion. And according to the Muslims, rhetoric is the art of embellishing truth, right? Presenting the truth in the best way, not falsehood. Very different worldview. So the sophists were people who made the worst appear to be the better cause, right? And they believed... And they actually said, men are either wolves or sheep. You're either a smart wolf or a dumb sheep. If you're a smart wolf, you eat the dumb sheep. And this is very common in modern corporate American culture, right? Is that the competition, you just do whatever you can. Well, yeah, it actually comes from wisdom, a word, Sophia. I don't know if the actual Greek root is, I'm pretty sure it is. Sophists were people that thought they were wise, clever. Sophisticated, same thing, yeah. And then he's going to go into really a key disease, and I think he spends almost as much time on this one as he does on riya, and that's ghadab. So I'm going to do that next week, inshallah. Is there any question anybody has?
Prophet Musa alayhi salam met Hazrat Khidr before he got the nubuwwah?
He met him before he was sent to the Bani Israel. Yeah. Yeah, no, he was a prophet, yeah.
How's bad opinion of others different from hating others?
What's that?
How's bad opinion of others different with hating others?
Yeah, it's different. A bad opinion of others is just thinking that they're bad people or without having proof. Hating them is something else. It's not having one. Hating is an actual feeling. It's an emotion, right? And we'll get into it. It becomes deadly when you actually act according to it. Tatayyur. Oh, yuman and sha'am. Tasha'um and tayammum. Yuman and sha'am. If you want them in Arabic. Like that. Anything else? Where? والعجب الاستعظام للنعيم مع نسيان كونهم من الله وقع. Oh, what he's saying is إخفاء ضرر, that fraud is to hide some religious or worldly harm. even if it's against a dhimmi. In other words, you can't cheat a non-Muslim either. Yeah, just because they're non-Muslim, you have to be upright in your transactions with everybody. So ghish can be towards non-Muslims as well. Mm-hmm.
Is there a proper way of reminding someone of something bad they did in the past? Like just trying to maybe they've forgotten something and they're repeating it and you remember it.
Yeah, that's not a good thing to do. I mean, it's easier for people to get beyond that if they're not reminded all the time. Obviously, if they're repeating something over and over again, then that's a problem. But if it's something that happened in the past and you remind them of it, it's just not a fair thing to do to people. Because it doesn't leave that door of changing open to them. Any other? What? Yusr, ease, inna ma'al usri yusra. Well, it's probably related to, because ashri is another one, usr. And yusr, it might be like, sometimes it's from the abad. The Arabs will name a thing by its opposite in order as a tafa'ul. Like they call mahlaka mafaza. Like the desert, they call it mafaza. And what they mean by it is mahlaka, but it's like kind of a tafa'ul that it'll be a place where they don't get destroyed. So yusr, by calling the left yusr, it means like, for most people it's hard to do things with your left. So if you call it yusr, it's like a tafa'ud, that it won't be hard for you. Allahu a'lam. I mean, that's very common in the Arabic language to do that. But I'm not sure if that's the reason. Uh-huh.
Last week we said for the way the Arabic language works for everyone.
Yeah, Sayyidina Umar, there's a tradition of Sayyidina Umar, he said that عسر واحد لا يغلب يسرين, that one difficulty will not overcome two eases. And the reason for that is that in that ayah, Allah says, إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. And he gives the usr is ma'rifah, it has a definite article, and the yusr is nakira, it's indefinite. And then in the second ayah, it says, إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. In the second ayah, that alif lam is called a'had. It's an alif lam that is a repeat of the first one. So it's the same usr. Whereas the yusr, because it's a nakira, it's a indefinite, it actually is a second yusr. So the idea is that even that with one usr comes two eases. Allahu a'lam.
About like bad vibes, to say that
Bad vibes. Yeah, that's like a 60s term. There was a song, Bad Vibrations. People used to say that, like groovy. People, have they heard that word? I mean, that's scary, but that, when I grew up, that was a word. Was that a word? Groovy. And that came from in the groove, right? On a record, right? Groovy. It's in the groove. And actually, Dr. Suleiman Yang told me that hipster. Now people know, like, he's hip. I think they even still use that word, don't they? Hip, still around, right? Hip. A hepcat in Wolof language means somebody who really knows what's up. It's actually a West African term, hepcat. He told me that, Dr. Suleiman Yang. So a hipster, and this is what happened with a lot of these jazz musicians in New York and things, they were hanging out with Africans from Africa, and there was a lot of cultural exchange going on, and many of the original hepcats actually became Muslim, right? And some of the real big jazz musicians like Pharoah Sanders and John Coltrane, they became Muslim. And John Coltrane was a Muslim, because I heard that from his wife. I met John Coltrane's wife, Alice, and I asked her, is it true that John Coltrane was a Muslim? She said, yes, he was. His name was Jamaluddin, and he was very proud of his Islam, And he is considered the greatest jazz saxophonist that ever lived. I think there's some validity, to that idea that people do have bad energy and people have good energy. If you want to use those terms, I don't know how well they work. I mean, we would say ruh tayyiba wa ruh khabitha. He has a good soul or a bad soul. رَجُلُ سُوءٍ, a bad person, وَرَجُلُ صَالِحٌ, a good person. And insijam, like munsajam, means somebody who's in the groove. Literally in Arabic, insijam means to be in the flow, right? Munsajam, somebody whose heart is munsajam, it's in harmony, right? And you can see it in music also. Cacophonic sounds are not harmonious. And there's a vibration, a sound vibration that hurts the ear, and then something that's melodious has a good impact on the ear. So I think it comes from that. Just people do get a feeling from certain people. And certainly if all of us have this experience, if you're around people that are depressed, it's very easy to start feeling depressed. In other words, it's like entering into some kind of, you know how the moon, like last night the moon had this real aura around it, right? And it's like that. People have aura. I don't want to starting to sound too new agey, but people do have these fields that you get into that are either uplifting or they actually bring you down, or some are just kind of neutral. Again, yeah, I would think that if you don't feel comfortable with a person, you should not consider, to say I don't feel comfortable around that person is not the same as saying it's a bad person. Because I had one of my teachers, Sheikh Hamid, told me once when he was a student, he said there was a man who really liked him, a student there, and he was always with him, and he didn't like him. He just didn't like him. And he went to Murabbir Hajj and he told him, he said, I feel bad because I don't really like being around this person likes being around me. And Murabbir Hajj said to him, Arwah junudu mujannada. The souls are regimented ranks, and ma ta'arafa minha at-taraf wa ma tanakara ikhtaraf. The souls, some souls don't feel harmonious around each other. And it doesn't mean that they're bad or something like that. It's just some people you might not feel a connection to, and other people you feel an immediate connection to. And some of the ulama say it had to do with the pre-worldly existence of the arwah. The closer arwah were to you on that day of the mashhad, the more affinity you'll feel towards them. And the further away they were from you, the more distant you'll feel towards them. So there are people you meet, and it's like instantaneously you feel like you've known them all your life. Like I had that feeling with Sheikh Abdullah al-Qadi. When I first met him, it was just like it's like I knew that person all my life, and I think he felt the same way. So there's certain people you'll have an instantaneous connection with, and other people you won't. And then some people it develops over time. And there's wisdom in all of those things. One is where you have a bad opinion of somebody without having any proof. Distrusting people is not one. In other words, as a general principle, you are distrustful of people. The ulama say it's wisdom in bad times. It's wisdom to be on your guard. Don't become paranoid, right? I mean, the idea is not to become paranoid, right? Do you hear what he said? Do you see how he looked at me? You don't want to do that. That's a psychological condition to be avoided. Seriously. Alhamdulillah.